Hello! Showing here, I'm a Japanese carpenter. Today, I'm going to show you how to install a ceiling. First, I'm going to install the frame, sensor installation, and finally some fireproof ceiling panels. Before installing the frame, I need to fill in some gaps between the boards with polyurethane foam spray. This is a 40-year-old wooden Japanese-style home with clay walls. Above the girder, Mendo is installed between the rafters. Typical in houses with clay walls, this house has large gaps between the rafters, and a cold wind will blow into the room from there. Also, the outside walls are white plaster and have begun to deteriorate. As a result, there are large gaps above the ceiling. I'll fill in them neatly. Now, a cold wind won't blow into the room anymore. After 20 to 30 minutes, the polyurethane foam spray will harden and be firm to the touch. This builds a simple foothold for installing the ceiling frame. This house is pretty old, and a lot of these bolts have loosened up over time. They need to be tightened before installing the ceiling frame. Previously, this house had another Japanese-style ceiling. You can see here that the walls are also Japanese-style. Japanese-style ceilings use 45mm square piece of lumber known as Mawari Buchi. Since those gaps are left from the previous ceiling, I'll install studs parallel to the columns there. I'm measuring where I want the height of the ceiling to be. I finished installing the frame in the next room yesterday, and the measurements should be uniform. I'll draw a marking based on the height. The ceiling will be at the height of the Mawari Buchi that I installed earlier. I wanted to raise it a little more, but I hit some wiring, so it's going to be the same height as the ceiling in the other room. It was a bit tricky. You may be asking, why the newly added kamoi isn't attached at the top here? The top beam is thin, and because there is a jimune, the beams can sink down when it snows. The gaps make it so the kamoi doesn't sink down, and so the sliding door can move back and forth when it is installed. Now, it's time to cut and install the ceiling frame. I'll be using Nobuchi. Nobuchi is known by many names in different areas. I'll use a 4cm square piece of lumber for the whole ceiling. I'm securing the Nobuchi with 75mm screws. I've installed the Nobuchi around the perimeter of the frame, and I need marks at 30cm intervals, so I can see where the cross sections will go. I'll install the 3 ceiling joists first. When using zinc furring strips for the frame, I'll install the ceiling joist at 30 to 40 cm intervals. Now, it's time to install the cross sections of the Nobuchi at 30 cm intervals and attach to the inside of Nobuchi around the edges. Be sure to cut the lengths so that they won't be too tight when installing them. Install the Nobuchi every 2 to 3 places and then install them in between. If I install them in order, the outer edge of the frame will start to bend, and I'll need to cut the lengths longer and longer as I go. Then, I'll secure the cross sections using 65mm screws at both ends, like I'm doing needlework. Now that I've finished installing the cross sections, I need to install the ceiling hangers using some of the Nobuchi from what I cut earlier. The ceiling hangers need to be secured with 75mm screws. Be sure to use 2 screws at these points of contact. Unlike nails, screws can break. The second screw is a precaution. The center hanger should be about 6mm higher if installed at intervals of 2 ken. This will prevent the ceiling from looking droopy in the middle. Next, I'll install 15mm furring strips to act as studs between the columns. Now with the frame finished, it's time for the installation. This is 100mm glass wool. After removing the seal, it'll spread out like a lifeboat. Arrange it neatly as possible, allowing for tight installation. The frame is finished, so I'll install the panels. Put a mark on the position under the Nobuchi. The through columns is 50mm wider and it'll overlap the panels. Therefore, I'll cut out the amount first. When I install panels, I'll use a tension rod for support. The tension rod will support the panels patiently without complaining. It's a good companion. I use Max as a high-pressure air screw machine, but it broke the other day. It's now back from repair and in good condition. However, Max's screw machine is heavy, so it's a little tough for me these days. Glue the board sides where they connect. Shift the panels so that the panels don't line up, making it less likely to crack. Even if a crack does occur, it won't spread throughout the room. The fireproof panels will be plastered, so I won't chamfer the side of the panel. I'll use 4 screws for the inside of the panel and 5 screws for the outside. Now I've finished the ceiling installation. I also filled the gaps in the plaster and clay walls with polyurethane foam spray. Judging from the amount used, that there was a gap for one window, so I'm sure the room will be warm. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.